Hey everyone, it's Yash with the Turn on Engagement podcast brought to you by Hub Engage. Today I've got Anthony Bolton, Senior Manager of Employee Communications and Events at Gulfstream Aerospace. Anthony's got some great storytelling today on COVID-19 employee communications, how they really weathered the storm through some great execution of tactics, the impact that had on getting a seat at many tables, putting employee communications firmly on the map inside of the organization. Their executive leadership, from the CHRO to the president and CEO, really stepped up their game to make sure employees were well taken care of. And he's going to talk about what that really means for the future. There's a silver lining to all of this in this story, where they're now set to take employee communications and engagement to soaring new heights at Gulfstream. So all of you employee comms folks listening, you're not going to want to miss your peer talk about some really great ideas they brought to life in rapid fashion. And it's all coming up next here on the Turn on Engagement podcast, brought to you by Hub Engage. Hey everyone, and welcome to the Turn on Engagement podcast. I'm Yash, Senior Vice President, Engagement over at Hub Engage. And today I have a very special guest, Anthony Bolton, Senior Management of Employee Communications and Events at Gulfstream Aerospace. He's joining us today, and I'm very excited to talk to Anthony today and hear the story of how they've sort of communicated to employees and conducted events over the past year. You probably all know Gulfstream as a very popular brand name. They produce business jets for a variety of different customers globally. So I'm going to talk to Anthony today specifically about what happened last year with their COVID communications and how they had to address their corporate communications, and specifically how that is worked to change the way they communicate and engage with their employees, and what impacts have that had on the future of communication. So Anthony, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Yash. I'm happy to be here.
So I guess I'll start it off with, very simply, how have you addressed employee engagement during COVID-19 and kept that communications flow going to your workforce with everything that's happened?
Yeah, I mean, there's a whole lot to unpack when you bring up COVID. There's so much to unpack, but I think, when we went to lockdown, and it seemed like the world was just changing almost by the hour or something. In those early days, something was changing, and we were having to respond to it. And of course, knowing our employees, we're also reading about these changes in the media, and it was all happening so fast. And so our primary focus was to say, okay, we need to communicate often. We need to communicate as often as possible. And so we did kind of feel like we were a bit of a communications machine, or factory, if you will, in those first like 60 days or so of the pandemic in the U.S. once it got to the U.S. But we wanted to stick with that plan of communicating often, which I realize is a fairly fundamental when you get into crisis communications planning and that modality. But I think something that we did that maybe was a little unique and kind of required for this situation is we made sure that our employees were hearing very often from our company president. We really wanted them to feel like he was very in tune with what was happening, and in this situation with employees, living it with them, and not just, yes, as the president of Gulfstream, as the leader of Gulfstream, but also as a fellow human being. And so we really made sure that they heard very often from Mark Burns, our president. And because we do have because we are in manufacturing and we do have a workforce that is, that we're, watching video and things of that nature, not always really accessible to them. We did leverage a lot of messaging, a lot of our email channels. So we had messages from Mark on almost in the, you know, came close to a daily basis for a while, but then it kind of slowed down. And then we also realized that our employees probably needed a place to go where they could kind of find general information about our response to COVID-19 crisis. So we created a special page on our intranet, and we put all of our, sort of archived all of our messaging out there, but we also created a safe work playbook that kind of came more into play when we started going back to the office. But of course, our manufacturing and service employees never really went home. They had to continue to go in and manufacture and service aircraft. So we needed to have we put a lot of protocols in place, and of course that was a lot of our communications was around those protocols. So the Safe Work Playbook was a great resource, and people could just go out there and find it on our special COVID-19 page. And then another thing that we did to sort of help separate the more strategic and engagement messaging from our leadership with those messages from Mark. Another thing we did was we set up an email channel, and we basically named it COVID-19 updates. So we put more of the operational and functional kind of messaging in that. Here's what you need to do on this date, or hey, this is a change to this protocol, and that change is effective immediately, and that kind of thing. So we really tried to help people, and people really, the feedback we got from employees was really good because they appreciated the COVID-19 update emails because it gave them really concise, information, just very fact-based, quick read type stuff. But then, as I said, the messages from Mark were a little more on that level of his view of things, and sort of helping people understand why we were making some of the changes we were making, and again, and also there was some tough messages that that we had to put out there as well. Like for example, when we early days, we were sort of reporting when we had cases, and and that just wasn't easy for people to hear, and so I think I think one other thing that we managed to do is kind of take we took a perspective. We really took all of the communications that we probably that we had planned for at least the first half of the year, all of our projects and initiatives, and we just said, you know what, these things are important, but we've really got to focus on this crisis, and we really have to focus on keeping our employees informed and taking care of our employees, and so the health and safety of employees was always our priority, and it remains our priority, and it was not while it was kind of tough to set some of those other projects aside, those things that we were looking forward to executing in 2020, it really seemed like the right thing to do, which I know helped my team really focus more on keeping the communications around the crisis sharp and engaging, and timely.
That's fantastic. This is, great to hear. Especially love to hear, how leadership, really jumped in headfirst and got involved and drove a lot of the messaging coming out. I think one of the most important lessons that I think we've all learned from the pandemic is when the messaging comes out top down, it has to be authentic. It has to be obviously, very much in tune with keeping your finger on the pulse of what's going on right now, but it gives your leadership an opportunity to also, humanize themselves, right? And say, look, I get it. I'm going through this and taking this a day at a time, just like all of you are, no matter who you are in the company. So it sounds like that's exactly what happened. So that must have really been great to enhance their profiles of leadership and also show that Gulfstream cares, really genuinely cares, and all the things you talked about of just doing the right thing, health and safety, taking care of employees, putting them first, making sure that they not only have the information but they know what to do with it, and that they're well cared for. It's definitely heartwarming to hear that. So thank you for sharing that story. Um, Having said that, I would think that this really put employee communications on the map, right? With your C-suite and also kind of how employee communications lives inside of your organization. Can you talk a little bit about that? I think you mentioned that internal communications lives in HR, but it has a lot of value that it's now integrated into many specific HR functions and things like that. How did that influence or change?
Yeah, so I think this is something I reflect on a lot because the the pandemic really the crisis really did put a lot of emphasis on internal communications. I mean, I have peers at other organizations, of course, people I know through the Public Relations Society of America, um, who who are practicing internal comms professionals, and and it was just amazing to we were all sort of at the same time. We're like, wow, we've arrived. Like they noticed us. They've now we've got the the seat at the table, so to speak, that that we've
Right.
always wanted. And and I think I think there's certainly a lot of truth to that. I know for us at Gulfstream, I would even go so far as to say that we were absolutely an essential function um, throughout 2020. And essential in a at a level that probably no one would have really considered internal comms at before. Um, Always important to the company, but we were really mission critical. Um, and so yeah, so we've got we've got some I think we've got some credibility that perhaps was there, but is just a little more so now. Um, but the our yeah our CHRO, who I report to, Amy Ariano, is she really has the seat at the table with the C-suite. But she and I think she is the perfect. She does a great job of talking with me about before she kind of goes in the room with them, and then she does a great job of representing the sort of perspective from an internal communications perspective, or from internal communications, and for whatever it is. And I mean, there were, and last year there were very frequent meetings. The C-suite was having very frequent meetings about the crisis and our response. And so there were a lot of conversations there was a lot of conversation, a lot more conversation about communications happening at that table than had ever happened, which I was really delighted with. And I didn't really care that much about whether I was actually in the room. It wasn't that important to me, honestly, because I knew that my perspectives were being shared via Amy. Um, and I think part of the reason I didn't really feel like that was that important is that, the or another reason is that, we it's something that sort of internal comms people, we just sort of sit around and I think wish that we had that sort of seat at the table. And I think that's a really big, it's a lot of pressure to put on ourselves in a way. It's also a tough proposition. I mean, I know organizations where the head of corporate communications is not even part of the C-suite. So I think the expectation that internal comms, and I think one day we'll get there, but I think for us to be there anytime soon is probably a little um, it's probably a little ambitious, and I think it can be a little demoralizing too. So the I think the approach that I've always taken with this is the I I'd rather have a seat at many tables, not necessarily the table with the C-suite. And kind of what I mean by that is what you mentioned just a moment ago, Yash, is the one of the things that really helped us be so nimble and so effective as an internal comms function uh, through the crisis has been the relationships that we have with other functions across the business, um, and those functions that also played a really critical role in helping us work through this, um, like our health and safety team, our facilities teams, um, and of course HR and other teams within HR, like benefits, where we've done so much work with them around um, mental wellness campaigns, and just those relationships that we've had, the seat at those tables with those partners that has always been a focus for me. It's always been important, those relationships, because when you have those relationships established, when you get to a crisis, that's when you really see the true benefit of having those strong partnerships. When you know those people, when you've worked with those people on some initiatives here and there, when it all kind of hits the fan, so to speak, you're already attuned to each other, and you kind of know what the priorities are, what the strengths and opportunities are within each team, kind of who has what role, and who you need to go to for what. So, um, I think it's a I think it really was so key for us, and you know, it, I think it's something that I would really encourage other internal communication pros at other organizations to really make sure that they're sort of reaching across the aisle, if you will, building those relationships, having those strong partnerships with other key functions in your company. Um, there's loads of benefits outside of just times of crisis, and I think it's really it really it also really helps people understand that the scope and scale of internal communications is so much more than newsletters and some e-blast. And
Yeah,
so
that's right. Yeah.
it really helps put into perspective, hey, this function uh, is 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 a is a holistic function for the organization, and there's there's a lot that we can offer to uh, to anyone who who wants to improve engagement and the employee experience. So
That's great. Yeah, I mean, talk about making lemonade out of lemons. You had this sort of out of left field crazy situation with the pandemic, but it sounds like you guys were really able to take it and kind of grasp it by the horns and get a silver lining out of it at the end of the day by improving the relationships, really getting employee communications to have that seat at the table, just like you talked about, improve those relationships, and really almost bring to the surface, employee comms is not the same as HR comms and small things like that, a lot of times people don't really think through, or don't understand the value of the relationship or what each person is or department or group is responsible for doing. So it sounds like a lot of awareness has come around that. And I think I agree with you 100% when you say it would be great for, hopefully other companies, your other peers, employee communications peers out there can learn from that as well and work on those relationships, because that's what it's all about. I mean, when it's crisis time, you got to count on those relationships. So that's absolutely great to hear. And I assume that, everything you've learned in the past year is directly influencing the future of how you guys will work and how you guys will do employee communications at Gulfstream. Are there specific, you talk a lot about the relationships and things like that, but are there specific learnings that you now know that you didn't know before that are going to change how you guys actually operate and communicate, to all your workforces, your segmented workforces, whether they're hourly employees, manufacturing people, or people in the office, et cetera?
Yeah, I think, well, I think one thing we learned is, uh, and it almost makes me cringe a little bit to say this, but one thing we learned is email is still a really powerful communication tool.
Uh-huh.
Um, I think I think that I mean, there's because we don't necessarily, because we can't necessarily force people to go and look at our intranet every day. Although, I would certainly encourage them to all go look at our intranet every day. Because we have some really compelling content out there, and we keep it pretty fresh. But it's not a reasonable expectation to just sit back and think, oh, everybody's going to see this article.
Yeah.
So we've never really operated from that perspective, but we were also somewhat conservative with email communications in the past. But boy, the crisis really showed us that people read email. They still read email, on some levels, I think email seems like a somewhat antiquated tool when you look at some of the social platforms that are available for internal comms now, and there's employee apps and some great tools. I'm not certainly fantastic stuff, but I think we were really surprised at the traction that emails had with our audience.
Mm-hmm.
I think we also learned that I think we also realized that there's really no one way to execute during a crisis,
Mm-hmm.
because every crisis is different. I mean, we because we're our headquarters is in Savannah, Georgia, and that's where I am, and we're we're prone to the occasional tropical storm or hurricane, and we've got a fairly reasonable kind of play book for those types of events. The great thing about a hurricane, in a way, and well, great thing, I guess there's not really great things about hurricanes, but the one advantage we have is it's coming. But when something unexpected happens, yeah, there's not necessarily that crisis plan that you can pull up, and yeah, you can leverage elements of it, but I'm not sure. There's just no way you can plan for every scenario. So we definitely found ourselves um, getting really creative, and at times doing things that were necessary, but as communicators, really made us a little. It was a little sort of cringeworthy
Sure. Yeah.
at times, but it was the right thing to do. I don't have zero regrets from anything that we executed. Really, it just wasn't always sort of what would come natural for us, as the right sort of tactic, if you will. So there's there's a so I think the bottom line lesson there, Yash, is that you've got to be open. You got to be open to doing things that might be just a little different, and uh, and sometimes there really isn't like a right way or a wrong way. There's just, this is the thing that needs to happen today, um, and um, and that can be tough sometimes. It can be tough to sort of take what you know and sort of feel in your gut from your experiences, and as an expert in your field, and say, okay, well, I'm just gonna throw that out the window right now and go do this. And that can be kind of tough, but if it's the right thing and if it's what needs to be done to support the company and support employees, then sometimes you just have to do it.
Yep, you just got to go for it. Yep, yep.
Yeah.
No, I totally hear you on embracing the change and almost move fast and break things, right? And then if it doesn't work, try something else. I think that's definitely an important business learning there. You also have events under your sort of your purview as well. I'm just curious, what do events look like? Well, what did they look like this past year? What are they looking like for the future?
So, well, this past year they were pretty non-existent.
Yeah.
Social, a lot of our bigger events, since the majority of our employees are in Savannah, we're able to do some annual events here, like celebrating our veteran employees, and we do sort of we do like a kind of a family, some sort of family focused, sort of picnic, and bit of a sort of county fair kind of feel that we call Family Day.
Mhm.
And so, and we do some events similar to those in some of our other locations as well. But the obviously you can't do something like that, with COVID protocols in place, social distancing and all that. I mean, it just would be irresponsible. So we knew as soon as the pandemic started that we were not going to be doing events for a while, and it was kind of scary. It was a little like, wow, what does this mean? How long is this state going to exist for us? Um, and I think the my events crew just did, they did a fantastic job of saying, well, maybe we can't do events the way we used to, but there probably is a way to still do something to engage employees around these particular occasions and these sort of celebrations that we would have. So yeah, we had to delay some things last year, sort of off our normal timeline, but they did a really great job of doing some virtual and hybrid style events. The sort of carnival picnic thing that I mentioned earlier turned into more of a drive-through type event where people just stayed in their cars with their mask on. They rode through this big parking lot that we'd sort of set up, and they set up some entertainment kind of along their route. And then at the end of the route, they got a big bag of a basket of food already prepped for them and their family, and they went home, and it was just really taking the whole sort of event and turning it on its head and making it work during COVID. And I think I think I think they just did a fantastic job of still trying to offer employees something that felt kind of normal, even though it was really anything but normal, um, in a sense, and employees really appreciated it. I think going forward, the exciting thing is that we do have some. We're feeling optimistic about being able to do some some hybrid and maybe in-person type events later this year, um, which is typically when most of our bigger events happen. Um, and so, we're slowly, kind of like the rest of the country, we're slowly starting to come out of this thing, right? So,
Right. Right.
so there's a lot of hope that we're gonna be able to offer experiences for employees that are much closer to what we had, pre-COVID.
Right.
So all good stuff, all really positive, and I think we're all real. I know all of us as human beings are really looking forward to getting to that day.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. No, I think as you guys, as we all turn the corner on this, hopefully, and you can start to get more of those face-to-face interactions, and particularly with the events going. I think that's exactly what the doctor ordered for all of us right now, just from a mental health perspective as well.
Yes.
So to start to feel a little bit normal again.
Yep.
All of these things have just been great to hear. My last question to you would just be around, all these great things that you guys have done, and you've managed to weather the storm fairly well. Is there an opportunity to sort of connect the dots between, all the great internal communications and things you're doing, and connect those dots to your external communications, to the things your customers see? Because from what I hear, obviously you guys have a great culture, your mission, vision, your values, all that is shining through the things that you guys did. I'm just wondering, it would be great if your customers could see that too, because when they're making decisions on business jets and things like that, sometimes these things play a role, right? They like to know that their partners are good stewards of corporate citizenship, right? That they're doing it, and then they're doing it right. I'm wondering if there are any plans or any ideas to maybe take some of this and have it come across in your external brand.
Yeah. So and you're spot on. Our customers and partners of the organization are very uh, they are very conscious, and interested in knowing sort of what kind of, yeah, I guess you boil it down to sort of corporate social responsibility,
Right. Right.
right? So interestingly enough, yes, we have had some well, throughout the whole crisis, I stayed very well connected with our head of corporate communications and public affairs, and also our community investments team. And so there's a lot of there were definitely some philanthropic opportunities that were presented to Gulfstream. Last year, uh, some of those opportunities were kind of related to PPE supplies. There were some PPE shortages, and so we were able to help with some of that. We did some a 3D printing lab, uh, helped supply some parts for respirators and things of that nature. And so we shared those stories with our internal audience, and they were of course shared with our external audience. And this year, uh, my team has partnered a little more on the event side. Well, in some ways on the event side with the vaccine efforts. So Gulfstream has close partnerships with some organizations, particularly here in Savannah, and we've also partnered with the state, and they set up a mass vaccination site on our campus, and we also partnered with some local organizations for clinics around the area, some vaccine clinics. And so my Ben's team has worked with our community investments folks to help support those events and support the volunteers, making sure that they had everything that they needed and were taken care of. And then, with the state mass vaccination site, we also coordinated on the communications and event side with those state agencies, it really has been a great story. It's been a great story for Gulfstream in our communities and in the industry, and it's also been a really great story for our employees, because while we were communicating as much as we could, sort of the where you can get the vaccine, when you can get the vaccine, all the details, all the why getting vaccinated is a good idea, so forth and so on. We were also able to show them how we were not just supporting employees, but supporting our employees' families and the communities where they live. And so that's still going now. And I think later this year, we'll have we'll look back on everything that we did this year and have a really compelling some really compelling content to put out there. We've been capturing video and doing some interviews. We've been getting some testimonials from employees and people who have volunteered at some of the clinics. So it's really been something to see it unfold and see everyone coming together. And it is really there. Gulfstream is very community focused, and very people focused. And it's one of the reasons the culture, as you mentioned earlier, and our values is really one of the things that I really love about working here.
That is fantastic. This has been really fascinating to sort of hear and learn about, your whole story. Lots of best practices in there. Some really great nuggets of information. Anthony, thank you so much for sharing, your story and your time with us today. Maybe 6 months down the road, a year down the road, we'll do another one of these. We'll do a part two and see where we are a year from now.
That would be great.
Yeah, that would be great. But I'd like to thank you very much for joining us today. I know our audience definitely will appreciate hearing this story. And for those of you listening, when we do post this on YouTube in the description section, we'll also have a link to Anthony's LinkedIn profile there, so you can contact him and see if you want to continue the conversation and talk about some of the things that maybe you're working on in your organization. So if we can help you and connect you to great companies like Gulfstream that obviously get it and are doing it right, then that's all for the best. So thank you, Anthony, for joining us today.
Thank you, Yash. I appreciate it.
All righty. Thanks. Have a great day, everyone, and stay tuned for the next podcast coming up. We'll have some other great recordings coming up. I believe the next one we are doing is with a large insurance company based here in Boston. So we will be announcing that in the next week or so, talking to the Director of Public Affairs and Corporate Communications there as well. Thanks, everyone. Have a great day. Thanks for joining us. Hey there, employee communications and HR folks. We've got some big news to share over here at Hub Engage. We've officially been made a Society of Human Resource Management recertification provider. So if you're a SHRM member and you're in need of getting your mandatory recertification credits, you can tune into our new webinar series where we educate and train you on a variety of HR-related topics and trends, so you're up to date on your continuing education requirement. SHRM is a great place for all things HR, and with this exciting new partnership Hub Engage has created, we can now recertify you while you turn on engagement at the same time inside of your company. For more details and to sign up for a recertification course with one of our Hub Engage SHRM certified experts, visit hubengage.com and click on the SHRM tab under resources to get started today.